Hello, and welcome to the 12th episode of the Rocket IT podcast. I'm your host, Matt Hyatt, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with one man that has made it his life's mission to encourage, equip, and empower leaders across the globe. Having now founded over 20 businesses ranging from e-commerce to entertainment, Jeremie Kubicek is the embodiment of an entrepreneur. In addition to his current efforts at Giant Worldwide and his real estate development business, Jeremie is an acclaimed author, with his most recent book making Amazon's top 10 list of best business books in 2019. But regardless of the endeavors Jeremie pursues, his passion to fight for the highest possible good for those he leads is something to behold. And we're happy to have him on today's segment. So without further ado, Jeremie, welcome to the show.
I made it. I made it to the Matt Hyatt, the Rocket IT podcast, man.
You did.
So good.
Yes. I'll tell you what, it'll be interesting to look back, Jeremie, and see whether this episode resulted in a dramatic increase or decrease in the service. No, it's going to be great, man.
And my hair loss? Is that what you meant? Like, decrease the hair? No, that's both of us. Okay.
Or that's right. We both have that issue. So, Jeremie, I'm so glad you're here. It's going to be fun to have a conversation with you. You and I have known each other for quite a while now and spent a lot of time together. But I'm excited to have you on the podcast and to introduce you to the folks that we know that are listening to your show. So, let's start from the beginning a little bit. I want to kind of go a little bit back in the Wayback Machine. When you and I met, you were running an organization called Giant Impact, right? And what were you trying to do with Giant Impact? Tell us a little bit about that organization and what was the goal?
Well, to go way back, I'd started a company called Giant in 2002, and we had a number of different entities. And so we bought John Maxwell's assets because we had focused on strategy, capital, and people to help grow businesses. Nice. And the people part was what we decided to acquire with John Maxwell's assets. And that brought me to Atlanta. That brought me to Gwinnett County because that was where their headquarters was. And we basically assumed that and merged it into Giant at that point in time. So that was Giant Impact. And that was, for those who don't know, that was the Catalyst conferences. We built that into a national brand. I created a brand called LeaderCast and started that out of Gwinnett County. And then we sold, John Maxwell's assets back to him. And so it was a fun season. And so that's how we met. And you all obviously took care of us like champs, helping us as our kind of a outsourced partner.
Right. In the IT services space. Absolutely. We had the pleasure of working with you and your team, and that was really cool. So I know that you had transition with that organization and moved away from that. In fact, you moved. One of the things I remember you and I sitting together in a restaurant not far from Rocket IT headquarters. We're kind of talking about your future plans. And, the time that I had spent with you, I knew you as a big thinker, lots of ideas, lots of aspirations, and very much thinking a way to impact the globe. Like, I'm really into impacting my community. And you've kind of expanded that geographically quite a bit. I want to go out and impact the world. And so we sat down together and you told me about your plans that you were kind of moving on to the next thing, the next big thing in your life. And that started with, hey, you know what? I've decided that we're going to sell the house. We're going to pack up the family and we're going to move to Europe. And I remember you telling me, hey, I think we'll probably start another business, but I'm also going to use some time to travel around Europe a little bit, spend time with the family, get to know that part of the world. And every once in a while, I'll fly back to the U.S. to manage your affairs here. How's that working out for you?
It was great. It was a couple of things. It worked. So what you may or may not remember, but we had 9 Giant entities. We were really influenced by Richard Branson and, Giant,
Virgin
Planes, Virgin Music, Virgin Money, Virgin blah, 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 blah. So we had the same ideas like, hey, we can scale by creating these enterprises. So we started 9 giant entities. I think eventually we may have had up to 12, but somewhere like that. And what happened was, it was an experiment, and I would say, it kind of worked, it kind of didn't. In fact, I probably wouldn't do it again,
Really?
because 9 different directions with 9 cooks in the kitchen, going with different vision.
Right.
And so I also realized that we weren't Richard Branson at the time we were building that. So what I did is I had kept Giant Impact, then I moved and started Giant Worldwide, another giant enterprise. Eventually, I ended up taking them all back and either selling them, turning them off, or merging them all into one. So we have Giant. We have one Giant, and it was just a great experiment. But the experiment with my family was dramatic as well. So we went over and we lived in a, you got to come there and experience it. But we lived in this manor house, 10-bedroom manor house, and we basically have this philosophy of who says we can't,
Hmm.
who says we can't, um, work with, pick a company, who says we can't influence the British government, who says we can't work with, uh, you know, Google or big companies, the U.S. Air Force. And we kind of went with that attitude and kind of started a process. And so it spread, and we were building a business, and I was trying to pour into my kids because I had just become uber intentional with my family more than ever, with my wife, with my kids. And so I started treating them differently, training them differently. I was involved in apprenticeship with them and multiplying and giving them and growing a business at the same time. So it was awesome. The only reason we come back was because our kids wanted to do high
Yeah.
school in America.
Yeah, there you go. So I want to make sure I didn't hear you say it. I want to make sure that it gets said. So that manor house was sort of in the rural part of the UK, not far from London, right?
Yeah, just
And
outside of London, right on the
yeah,
edge, right
and I
across the
did get
street.
to go there. Came and visited
Yeah.
you, and spent some time. And I know a lot of our friends did as well. And that was really cool because you were kind of at the same time you were working. I know you were very intentional with your family at that time, and in fact, the entire time that I've known you, I think that that has been true. But certainly saw that underscored while you were in the UK. But then at the same time, you're building this business, and this is the path that you've been down before. This is not, not your first rodeo, right? You've started many businesses. So before we kind of move forward and hear about what's happening with Giant, give us some background because I think some of the things you've done are, uh, unusual would be a good word to say, or
Totally.
rare is maybe even a better word.
Mhm.
You've done a lot, and so tell us about some of the businesses that you've been involved in over the years and some of the
Yeah.
highlights.
All right. So inspiration. Grandmother took me to Europe when I was 15 years old,
Oh,
just turning
nice.
16. Inspired me, like, oh my goodness. She said, it was this, I'll never forget, it was summer and I was a big skier. And she said, you can ski the Matterhorn in the summer. It's a glacier. You ought to go ski. I go, I don't have anything. I don't have my gloves. I don't. She goes, "No, you don't need anything. Here, take this." I borrowed people and I put
Right.
socks in my hands for gloves, and
Nice.
I wore socks and I skied the Matterhorn. And I'll never forget. Like my grandmother's like, "Well, who says you can't? So
Right.
you don't have everything you need. Well, take
Right.
these socks, put them on your hands." So
Nice.
that was like what started that. And then I got to college and got influenced by a professor who basically said, "Why don't you use business to change the world?" And like, you mean you can? How do you do it? And he
Mm.
showed me to Asia. And then we started a business in Russia together, my professor and I got a few other classmates, and we started an accounting training, marketing consulting, and we eventually started a economic school in Russia, in Moscow. It's called the Moscow Economic School. It's the largest private school in Moscow
All right, now
now.
hang on just a second. Just stop just a second there, Jeremy, because this is old hat to you. But for those that don't remember our history, this was when? When?
1993, just
1993. And so the
a
world was
year
pretty different then. A
a
year
year
after.
after the union fell apart.
Wow. Isn't that crazy? So
Yeah. So
so they welcomed you with open arms and said, "Yeah, welcome, comrade from America. Go ahead and start a business here." How is that? How it went?
Well, so you find, we have this philosophy: find people of peace. Who
Mm,
are the people of peace? So we found this guy named Yuri Shamalov. Yuri was our person of peace. He had the credibility. He had run the education in Moscow for the Communist Party, and he basically had a major transformation in his life, wanted to do something different. So we were the partners. So he ushered us in. We looked like we were 16. We looked like
mm,
Opies. And so no one thought we were doing anything, and we really weren't, but we did. And
mm.
we built up a business, and eventually sold it, and then kept the school continues to thrive. And it's one of those, like, you grew up on James Bond and John Wayne, and then
Right.
during the Cold War, you're like, "Hey, we're Americans. What can happen to us?" Is that kind of
Right.
feeling.
Right.
So very naive, but unbelievably fun at the same time.
Very cool. All right. What else? So you,
So we get back. I'm there, and I'm getting engaged to my college best friend, Kelly, and so then we were going to live in Russia, and the Oklahoma City bombing happened.
mm,
So my father-in-law was in the bombing. He
wow.
survived, lost most of his staff. So that shifted us from there. We decided to move back to Oklahoma. My dad had this philosophy he shared with me, and it's really important for those listening. He said, in your 20s, it's not what you do, it's who you work for that's most important.
Mm,
Find the person that you want to work for, and basically align with them. And that's way more important than what you did. So I ended up working as a pure, I mean, just completely white guy, as you can see, and working in the African American hair care business.
oh,
Uh,
perfect. Probably
primarily,
natural
yeah,
next step when coming home from Russia. Yeah.
but primarily because of the Humphries family. Kent Humphries, he was like a Matt Hyatt. He was just an unbelievable leader. People
Mm.
wanted to be around him, had great intent, built a really nice business. And I became eventually his vice president of marketing.
Oh, wow.
And then he sold the business, and I went to work for the private equity group that bought the business.
Mm.
And we bought 17 companies in 3 years. And I was
Wow.
basically on the acquisition team. And I was on the East Coast one week, West Coast the next week, traveling back and forth from Oklahoma for a number of years. Did that, and that's where I lost my hair. For any of you that know that world, seriously, I
Yeah.
did.
That's a pretty serious run.
And then we started some .coms and started the .com business. I started 3 .coms, sold one, lost one, turned one off,
Oh, wow.
and
Okay.
during the .com bust.
So you
And
wanted to
then,
try all the different experiences. We'll just go ahead
mhm,
and get them all
yep,
knocked out with the three. Good.
and then you have just started a number of businesses. I think, as I'm a connector in the five voices language, I'm a connector, creative pioneer. So my connector is always seeing opportunities and connecting people, and so I'm partnered with people. And I used to have a philosophy of a portfolio where I might be involved in 10 different things at one
Right.
time, and I have calmed down quite a bit since then. So in 2002, we eventually started Giant, and that was the beginning of the story I told you before. We started a growth consulting business, then bought John Maxwell, and then we
Mm.
have since been growing in lots of different places ever since. But yeah, that's a little history there for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm actually glad you mentioned the partnering aspect of the businesses you've been involved in. My observation of you is that most of the business entities that I've known about, and the ones that you and I have discussed, you have partnered with other people, uh, and that seems to be not only kind of an MO, but something that I think has worked very well for you. Rocket IT is a business that started on my own. I did have partners in the very early season, and that didn't work out, and so it's been basically me running the shop ever since. And there are times when that can be kind of a lonely experience, right? There's if something's going wrong, there's nobody to really talk to about it. You can't talk to your team and scare them to death. You can't go home and talk to your wife about it, scare her to death. You certainly can't talk to your kids. The dog doesn't care. So
Right.
at the end of the day, you look in the mirror and say, okay, I'm just going to have to deal with this, and so it can be can be kind of tough.
Yeah.
Is that the driving force behind the partnerships you created? Or why? How did you end up in that position? Has it been intentional, or is it just come naturally to you? Of hey, here's an idea. Here's the person I want to do this idea with.
Well, so I think it depends. I hear a lot of people and they'll say things like, "Oh, partnerships never work," and I
Mm,
don't believe that.
right.
And then I also say partnerships are not for everyone. For me, there was a term in the financial world called accretive. 1 + 1 = 3.
Mm,
It's the same with marriage. A good marriage should equal 3, not just 2.
mm,
It should be exponential.
right.
So marriage is a partnership. My wife is a business partner. She is a partner, and
Hmm.
she's my spouse, and my love of my life. So you think about that thinking. A good marriage should work. Well, the same is true with business. For me, I think I've just created such big vision that I've needed to have partners
Mm,
because I don't think I could do it. I mean, to
mhm.
do what we're wanting to do, to raise up a different type of leader in the world, to actually create a scalable people development business globally, I needed help. And it's not
Yeah.
just something that I can do alone. So you find skill sets. So Steve Cockram has been a co-founder and a business partner with me. He's been so helpful in his yin and yang, if you will, just that difference that we bring. I probably bring a little bit more of the business background. He brings a lot more of the personality background. And so
Mhm.
we kind of merge a lot of those things together, and it seems to work out really well. But the term of creative means it needs to. If it's bringing value, great. If it's diluting, then you need to make some changes.
Sure.
And dilution, you can feel dilution. So the commitment to each other is, how do you add value? How do
Mm.
you how do you add value to the organization to such a degree that it just makes sense?
There's a you touched on the spouse thing. There's something you and Kelly have, and my wife Maureen and I think have is you start realizing probably early on that hey, we're different. We're different backgrounds, different personality types, different preferences. We communicate differently. I might be more quick to point out something that uh, I perceive as just an interesting fact versus my wife might not say something about uh, a negative aspect of whatever, the way the house looks or what's going on with the money situation or how things are going with the kids or whatever, because she's concerned about how somebody else might feel if she were to say something. So in many ways, I think the old adage of opposites attract is true. That many times when folks get married, and maybe even in partnerships, they're attracted to somebody who brings something different to the table, uh, and that can easily spiral into a perception of conflict. Oh, I this is the way I am, and that's the way that she is, and we're different, and we're always butting heads. But the way I like to think about that is that that can be very complementary, right? Maureen is strong where I'm weak, and in many cases I'm strong where she's not feeling as confident. And so when you take those differences and put them together, you do get something more than just the sum of two parts, right? Is one of the things about that though is for us, and I think for a lot of people out there, the marriage is really meant to be a lifelong commitment. And so even when we're not feeling like we're perfectly in sync, there's no part of us that says, well, it's just not going to work. It's always, well, it has to work. It is going to work. It is, it is. This is what we've chosen to do. And so we're going to work our way through that. My point in all that is that may not necessarily be true in a business partnership. I don't think anyone enters a business partnership saying, okay, this is for life. I don't think. Uh, and so there's always this mind towards, well, one of the options is, well, we can just part ways and move on with our lives. So do you think about that kind of commitment? Does that enter into the equation when you're thinking about a new business partnership of
Uh, you know, I,
this
I,
is
I
for a
probably,
season or this is for a mission or
well,
a project or whatever?
I don't. I'm not seeking a lot of partnerships. Meaning, I have one
Yes.
now. So I'm not. We've been in it for about 6, almost 7 years.
Mhm.
Uh, so with my marriage, it'll be 25 years this summer. So it's
Wow. Kelly's been putting up with you for a long time.
I know. Uh, what's interesting though is you think about the concept that we use at Giant. We fight for the highest possible good of those you lead, so or those you love. So how do
Mhm.
you fight for the highest possible good of your spouse? So if you think about that verse just for a second, it'll translate to partnership. Your obligation is to fight for their highest possible good. And if the other person is to fight for the highest possible good, that usually moves up. It takes you both to another level. If
Mhm.
one person is fighting for and another person is fighting against, that's where you have friction. That's where you have an earthquake. If it's one person might be fighting for, another person's fighting for themselves.
Mhm.
Not for, so there's these dynamics at play. The same's true with partnerships. There's seasons where vision doesn't get aligned. That was hard for me. Where there's no vision, people perish. Where there's no vision, partners will find their own vision. And so for me, I had vision for the Giant brand, but I didn't have geographical or consistency with some of my past business partners, and they had a different vision than mine, which was fine. It became natural, but I was the founder of that. So I'm like, okay, well, take your vision, take your clients, and go for it because this is
Right.
the vision that we have. So and they were all amiable and very well done because that's the way we do it at Giant. There's not a lot of drama in that regard. So I think what it does, to your point, it comes down to the vision. What
Mhm.
is the vision? And has the vision changed? The vision can change. Meaning, you know what, Matt? I'm about to be an empty nester. Okay, 2 months. Well, let's say 5 months, but college and all that. But let's just say in the next 2 months, my daughter graduates. So if that's the case, um, I'm an end of an era, and then there's a transition season, and then it's a new season. I think it's okay for partners to think about eras and go, hey, is there a natural end of an era? And then you almost
Mhm.
have to review and go, hey, are we in it for the next round?
Right.
I know in my case with Steve Cockram, we've changed our business model to a SaaS model. So Steve,
SaaS, software as a service. Yep.
that's right, yeah, subscription model. So we moved now, and so our business is heavy tech, heavy content building, technology platform business. So Steve, who's been on our team, it moved out of the day to day operations of the organization, but he's still my partner. He's my partner in content creation. He's my partner in He's a non-executive director, still have
Mm.
ownership. He's playing a different role and helping build our value in our business in a different way. But the needs that we had for our team were very, very tech driven.
Right.
So, I mean, the conversations we're having, I mean, they're above my head in a lot of places. So, what's happening is then Steve recognized it. It was really a great. So, when you have a secure, confident, humble, mature partner, and they realize, I probably don't need to be on the team, like on the day to day business team. I probably need to be in this team out here, um, in a different, playing a different role. And he brought that to the table, and it was very mature. It was great.
Mhm.
Well, the dynamics were amazing because we basically spent a few days planning it out, mapping it out, and now we've been living that out. And that's just because of who he is. He's
Right.
very responsive. So if you don't have that kind of personality on the other side, it can be very difficult. If you have it, and there's probably going to be a point in time where I go, you know what? There's probably someone better to run this business than me if we get
Right.
to the levels that we're talking about. So
Yeah, sure.
just
It's interesting you
natural,
say that. Go ahead.
no, just saying natural era seasons.
Yeah. I wrote an article years ago, and my team's heard me talk about this a few times, about the 100-year business plan. What does it look like if an entrepreneur sits down or a leadership team sits down and writes a plan to see a business through to its 100th anniversary. And one thing we know, if we sit down and we write that business plan, you're going to look around the room pretty quick and realize that it's unlikely that anybody writing that plan will be around to see it come to fruition. And so if we're going to build a business that has the potential to see its 100th anniversary, one thing that we know for sure is that there, by definition, almost must be a transition from the current owners or leadership team to a
Right.
different owner and leadership team. And so, what are the building blocks and what's the foundation that we need to put in place today to not only deal with that eventual inevitable transition, but to embrace it as, hey, this is a natural part. I was reading an article at Berkshire Hathaway just last week, published its annual letter from the CEO and chairman, and so I was reading about that, and what he said in that letter was that Berkshire Hathaway is 100% ready for his departure, whether that's retirement or something different. And
Yes.
so I love that idea of dealing in eras and thinking about how do we treat ourselves as really as stewards of the organizations that we lead in planning for transitioning that to someone else at some time down the road.
This is, we create content, we write content, and mainly the content that we create is based on real world situations. And I've been talking about this for about 2 months. And the way it usually works is if I'm talking about something 6 months, I know it's a relevant topic and we start building things like performance. We're giantizing performance reviews right now because of that is such a major part of businesses. We're working on some succession pieces, expectations, but one of them is on transitions. And I
Mm.
really realized I'm really good at that. Like I'm not
Hmm.
good at financials. Like don't put me in as the CFO. I mean, I need people to do that. I'm just not very good at that. But I'm really good at transition. And when I mean transition, I don't mean just the simple act of, okay, Matt, you're now the new CEO.
Right.
I mean the season of transition that people are in. So, for
Mm.
instance, I do this with my kids. I meet with them between 16 and 18. I have an apprenticeship process with my kids. EQ, IQ, personality, what the 10 meals you need to learn before you leave this house, all the things I can think of to help with the transition. I get ahead of it. I've done it with, this is my third child I've done this with, and I do it based on their personality. It works brilliantly. It's really great. And it's really
Hmm.
fun. But when I sit down with them, I review once a quarter. I review the transition season they're in. So I met with my daughter Kate. We couldn't meet until this weekend. I met with her this weekend on let's look ahead at your transitions. Graduating high school, 2 months of money making, basically before college. What are you going to do? Nannying and babysitting and blah blah blah. And then you've got your transition into college. So let's work on those ahead of time. So I'm very proactive. Some people, I might be too proactive for them because they're not thinking that way. But I'm also been working for a couple of years with my wife's transition into empty nest because I know empty nest for females are typically more difficult, especially if they've been with their kids,
Right.
and
Sure.
for men too. Anyone who's staying home with them more or with them is more of the caregiver. Well, we've been working on that transition by doing our real estate projects, and
Yeah.
that was the strategy for Kelly. A big part of it was that. So my point is, if you look ahead, most CEOs I know they work so hard on making the donuts every day that they're not thinking. They know what to do to make the donuts, but they haven't thought about, hey, is this machine about to go out? Do we need to
You could say
replace?
there's a hole in their plan.
Oh, that was really good. Really quick
Chris
too.
is over here doing it.
But my point is that to go, hey, what does thinking ahead look like? What season are we currently in? And what season are we moving to? Or what season is my wife or child or teammate? What transition season are they moving into? And then how do I help them acclimate, grow into? How do I help them transition? And I think there's
Nice.
just a lot there. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's really cool. So tell me, Jeremy, tell me a little bit about Giant today. What is your mission? What are you trying to accomplish? How's that going? You said you were 6 or 7 years into it, and one thing that strikes me is, I was very fortunate in that I got to be very close to you when in those early days, and so I got to see sort of the initial idea and how it started, and I see what's happening today, and it's a little different. I think the goal is the same, but your tactic or your approach, I think, has changed quite a bit. So I'd like to hear about that a little bit. By the way, that's not a dig at all.
Oh, I didn't think.
My business is very different today than it was 10
Oh,
years ago also. But I just love to hear about kind of what are you trying to accomplish and what's new in the way that you're approaching it.
I'm going to reverse it and ask you to tell and explain, Matt, what is Giant? Give me the one sentence, and
Yeah.
then
So
I'll tell.
yeah, I think you'll probably correct me because here's the deal. When I'm telling people about Giant, I'm usually telling them, hey, this is a leadership development company uh, with people that work in an apprenticeship model with other leaders and rising leaders to help them take that information back to their businesses and organizations and to be able to utilize it within their team and carry it on their own. That's usually how I explain it.
So very good. No, I appreciate it. I
Oh,
think
okay. I was ready for you to say that was completely wrong.
no, what we've done is we've figured out. We use the term people development. Leaders are a part of people development, but here's what we figured out: is that most organizations they don't know how to scale their people.
Mm,
Because they have to do the donuts every day, because they're so fixated on just the everyday problems and issues, they're accidental with people development. So if you think about all of the people inside the organization, what would happen if we got them from a 68% to an 82? What would that lift do to an organization? And so what we figured out is that most leader development doesn't transfer very well. It's not scalable. It doesn't necessarily work. And most of it's been built on 20th century approaches. Butts and seats, come listen to a seminar, sell them a book. And the reality is, in the 21st century, these little devices called smartphones have taken over our world, and content from Netflix and Apple and Disney and whomever, all of the content and streaming, they basically have changed the way that we learn. So the 21st century approach is really, really simple. So it's simple, it's scalable, and it needs to be sustainable. So we say it needs to be for an educated 13-year-old. So what we've done is we've figured out how to help the cynical know-it-alls who don't read anymore, which is all of us. And we've created visual tools to create a common language that's objective language. And in essence, it's like a mirror. It's like, hey, Matt, this is what it looks like to be on the other side of me. Let me show you where I'm at. What do you think it's like to be on the other side of you? By you looking at a mirror, you can change. So in essence, Giant has figured out how to create a self-awareness system for people to change themselves, and then they become better performers inside organizations. So the long and short, we do scalable people development to increase human potential and increase performance of workers, employees, people, leaders, all of it. But the way we did it is we just mimicked Netflix, Peloton, and creating edutainment. And we started creating these categories. We call them Everyone. For $4.99 a month, people can take scalable people development and start using it. For $49 a month, a Sherpa, which we call a leader, anyone who leads people is a Sherpa on Mount Everest. A leader has to climb and help climbers. They have to perform and help performers. So that is a leader. We call them a Sherpas. So we have these different levels and layers. And so we basically created it for a subscription. So we can play and partner with consultants, trainers. We can play and partner with companies directly like Rocket IT, like the Gwinnett Chamber. Anyone can use and partner with us, and we become like a wholesaler or a reseller to people who want to do scalable people development. So as far as we know, we've been told this by so many companies we work with, we're the very first people development SaaS business because they haven't figured out how to scale it. And we think have. We know our content works. We just found a platform to partner and match with our content. And that's what we built ourselves. So that's what we're doing. We're basically trying to change the style and the standard of leadership around the world.
Oh, is that all?
Okay.
Right. That's a lofty goal. So, uh, in the time that I've known you, you've produced these amazing events through Catalyst and LeaderCast, where literally thousands of people would congregate on a particular location and see speakers live talk about various aspects of uh, human relationships and drive and leadership and all kinds of cool stuff. You've written books and sold a bunch of books, and so that's something that I think you're pretty good at. I've seen you lead smaller groups through longer programs, and so you've had a program in the past called Executive Core and then X Core, about a year-long program, bringing people together and going through an apprenticeship journey. And now, and I remember actually when you started using videos so that people could take that certain lessons, more than just sound bites, but really a certain lesson back and be able to listen to it over and over again, because recall works better if we've heard something multiple times. And so using the video to supplement that, I think, was a great idea. And you're right. I know, I remember growing up, if something was wrong with my car, I'd drive down to the auto repair shop and I'd spend the big bucks on the thick Chilton book. You remember those? I had like all the schematics and everything you want to know about a particular model of car. And that's how you learn. These days, I'm jumping on YouTube. That's probably the first place I'm going to go, Reddit or YouTube or something like that. And I'm trying to learn that way. And so it sounds like all of the the events and the you called them Sherpas, but the idea of working with a consultant or a leader to kind of walk us through a program. I still do the programs for small groups of peers working together, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But all of that is centered around this platform that you've built to share the video content. So is the idea that somebody like Rocket IT could just skip to the end and, okay, I'm going to go sign up for this video?
Yeah. Either way, it depends on the company. And that's the beautiful
Okay.
part. It's the flexibility of either or. Some people want high touch. Some people want high tech. Some people want high tech and high touch. It's
Mhm.
both, and it's what makes the most sense for the organization. And that's what we've been able to build. What we realize is that progress is a process. So where in the past, come watch my big event, we've aggregated all
Right.
these big speakers. Uh, After Catalyst or LeaderCast, about 1 week out, we were a memory. Then they're on to the
Mhm.
next thing. It wasn't good enough. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to see transformation. And I
Right.
realized that transformed habits, behavior, that's transformation over time. And it doesn't happen when someone points a finger and says, Matt, you need to change. It happens when Matt looks in the mirror and goes, oh my gosh, I need to change. So, how do I get you to look in a mirror? So, what we've done is we've created these tools and we go, hey, look, 10 minutes a week. What if you jump on Sherpa training 10 minutes a week? Here's the video we want you to watch. Here's the tool we want you to think about. Support challenge matrix to myself. Am I dominating myself? Am I liberating myself? Am I abdicating right now? We want you to analyze that. And then we want you to get healthy. We call it 100X. We want you to get 100% healthy. And then we
Mhm.
want you to learn how to multiply. We've just found that most people are 75 plus, generally healthy, and they're positively reactive. Hey, Matt, come. If my door is always open, if you ever need me, come see me. But
Right.
a positively reactive leader is completely different than a positively proactive leader.
Hmm.
And we just got so intentional with our families, with ourselves. Now we've packaged this and we've figured it out. We can scale. We can scale people development inside a company for $250 a month or
Hmm.
for $50 a month. It's just depending on what you want. Or if you want help, it can be, bring in a consultant or a guide. So the beauty of it is that we've given a system now that enables you, depending on where you're at, to use what you need, not to try to force you onto something that you don't really need. And sometimes people have overpower. They have too much people, and sometimes they don't have enough. And that's the adaptability that you can use with technology. So we just taken our content and we made it already worked. You've experienced it. We work with the US Air Force, Google, Leidos, Biogen, Pfizer, big companies, and small companies. It works anywhere. It works wherever there's people. And
Mm,
what we figured out though is now is leveraging technology in the same way that all of us are pretty comfortable with Netflix. We're pretty comfortable with Hulu or whatever aggregate, whatever platform you use. So in the same way, people are becoming comfortable with Giant inside organizations.
nice. So you mentioned these visual tools a couple times, and you mentioned one of my favorites. We called the support challenge matrix. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by a visual tool for those that have not worked with Giant before and don't know maybe what you're talking about? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we basically created these big concepts and put them into a visual form so that people can write them on a cocktail napkin. We have about 50 of these tools. When you learn a tool and can teach it to someone else, that's when you learn. And that's where
Mhm.
most leader development breaks down because it's all about you learning, but you don't know how to transfer. So we've simply
Right.
created a way for people to transfer.
Nice. So this platform that you're talking about, Giant TV, is that what we're calling it?
Yes, Giant is the platform. It's
Okay.
giant.tv. And
Okay. Giant.tv.
if you want to go try it out, it's giant.tv/JK. And
Nice.
that's a 30-day trial. Just
Okay.
giant.tv/JK and or do a demo and have one of our teams do a demo and show you how it works for your team.
Awesome. Hey, I know we need to wrap up pretty quick, so I want to get to our lightning round. I've got just 3 or 4 questions for you, super quick. Can you tell me one person in your life that's had a profound impact on your journey?
A guy named John Cragen. He was my professor. He just
Oh, he was the guy you went and started the business with in
Yep,
Russia.
he gave me the
Yeah.
vision of Who Says You Can't.
Awesome. What's the single most important lesson you've learned in your professional career? One thing.
Um, it's completely okay to screw up, and
Nice.
if you screw up, it's okay. You learn from it, and so I'm very comfortable with being a screw up. That's
We do make mistakes. It's unavoidable, right?
right.
Uh, Learning from them is the key part of that. Right? Don't make the same mistake over again. Any books or favorite podcasts you're listening to these days?
You know, I read biographies. I'm on an
Really?
Eisenhower biography right now, and I'm talking about a new book in my head on infrastructure that's pretty cool. So I'm kind of consumed with Dwight Eisenhower.
Nice. And then I do want to make sure we touch on podcasts because you've done a lot of podcasting. Tell us about your favorite podcast.
Well, we do. It would be the Rocket IT podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, what's another one? What's your second
You
favorite?
know, well, it's so funny. I listen to history podcasts, so
Oh,
I listen to
interesting.
a lot of different variations. And then we have our own podcast. So Steve and I do the Liberator podcast. So that's what we do, And so it's like, well, not what we do, but it's one of the things we do. But I enjoy documentaries probably even more than podcasts, honestly. And most of them,
Oh, interesting. Very cool. All right. So I want to make sure that folks know how to reach Giant, how to reach you. You gave us one URL to visit, giant.tv/JK, correct?
that's right.
Okay. Any other way that we should know to get in touch with Giant?
I think that's the best way. If
Awesome.
anyone is interested, I can check out jeremiekubicek.com for speaking and those things, but or giantspeakers.com. But most of it is giant.tv.
Cool. Okay. On that note, I believe it's time to wrap things up. Jeremie, from myself and our audience, thank you for joining us today. To our listeners, thank you for tuning into the Rocket IT Business Podcast. Should you have any suggestions on future topics you'd like to hear about, please email us at podcasts@rocketit.com. Finally, a quick plug for Rocket IT. We work with businesses, nonprofits, and municipalities in the area of IT support, information security, and strategic planning. To learn more about Rocket IT and its services, simply visit rocketit.com. Thank you.